Hey, what's up, y'all? Back at it once again. A Koski of Fun Day, kicking this for you and for yours. And I gotta give a shout out, as I always do to my ancestors for giving me the knowledge, strength, and understanding. And also give a shout out to y'all for watching, subscribing. The channel's been growing, it's been blowing up, it's been doing its thing. And I'm very proud of that. You know what I'm saying? Let's keep on pushing, man. Let's keep on making this stuff happen. You know. This right here is about Malcolm X, and at the Bayard Rustin. And this is excerpts from a debate. And I want to make sure this is known because a lot of people got stuff kind of twisted about the situation. So this is excerpts from the debate about Malcolm X at Bayard Rustin. As you see Malcolm X right here on stage with Bayard Rustin and the moderator. So without further ado, we're going to get into this. Malcolm X. In the past 2 years, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has become the most talked about black man in America because he has such a miraculous success in getting this program over among the so-called Negro masses. Time magazine last year wrote that he has eliminated among his followers alcohol, dope addiction, profanity, all which stems from disrespect of self. He has successfully eliminated stealing crime among his followers. Time has also pointed out that he has eliminated adultery and fornication and prostitution, making black men respect their women, something that has been carelessly absent among our men. Time also pointed out that Muslims, followers of Elijah Muhammad, have eliminated juvenile delinquency. When you think about it, Time is giving Elijah Muhammad, Mr. Muhammad, credit for being one of the greatest moral reformers that appears among the so-called Negroes yet. A few months later, U.S. News and World Report pointed out that Mr. Muhammad was successful in stressing the importance of economics. The point behind his program, farms to feed our people, factories to manufacture goods for ourselves, businesses to create jobs for ourselves, is to be economically independent rather than sitting around waiting for the white man to give us jobs. What the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has been teaching is not what we have been accused of: nationalism. Nationalism is a political approach to the problems that are confronting the so-called Negro in America. The aim of the black nationalist is the same as the aim of the Muslim. We are pointing towards the same goal, but the difference is in the method. We say the only solution is religious approach. That's why we stress the importance of moral reformation. I would like to stress that Mr. Muhammad is not a politician. He does not believe in a politics of the so-called solution. He does not believe in politics as the solution for the so-called Negro problem. It will take God. God will have his hand in it because the problem of the so-called Negro is different from the problems of any other black people anywhere on the earth since the beginning of time. Every condition of the so-called Negro was preordained and prophesied. We believe that we are living in fulfillment of the prophecy today. We believe that our history in America, our experience at the hands of slave masters, is in line with biblical prophecy. And we believe Mr. Muhammad's presence among the so-called Negroes here in America is in line with biblical prophecy. Host. Does this involve the creation of a separate state in America? Malcolm X. It involves the creation of a black state for the black man, if not in America, then somewhere else on this earth. If not abroad, then here in America. Primarily, it involves acquiring some land that the black man can call his own. If the powers that be don't want it here, then they should make it possible for us to do it somewhere else. Host. It does involve politics then. Malcolm X. Any religion that does not take in consideration the freedom and the rights of the black man is a wrong religion. But politics as such is not the solution. But the divine solution would have to have the ingredient in it. You can call it politics if you want, but the overall problem of the so-called Negro in America is not a political problem as such. It is an economic problem, a social problem, a mental problem, and a spiritual problem. Only God can solve the whole problem. Bayard Rustin. I am happy to be here, and I think Malcolm X can clarify some of the questions he had brought up in my mind. I believe the great majority of Negro people are not seeking anything from anyone. They are seeking to become full-fledged citizens. Their ancestors have toiled in this country, contributing greatly to it. The United States belongs to no particular people. In my view, the great majority of Negroes and their leaders take integration as their keyword, which means that rightly or wrongly, they seek to become an integral part of the United States. We have, I believe, much work yet to do, both politically and through the courts. But I believe we have reached a point where most Negroes, from a sense of dignity and pride, have organized themselves to demand to become an integral part of all the institutions of the U.S. We are doing things by direct action, which we feel will further this cause. We believe that justice for all people, including Negroes, can be achieved. This is not a unique position, and while a controversial one, it is certainly not as controversial as the one Malcolm X supports. Therefore, I would like to ask him this question. The logic of your position is to say to black people in this country, we have migrated and set up some state in Africa. It seems to me this is where you have to come out. Malcolm X. Well, Mr. Rustin, let me say this about full-fledged, or as they say, first-class citizenship. Most of the so-called Negro leaders had got the Negro masses used to thinking in terms of second-class citizenship, of which there's no such thing. We who follow the Honorable Elijah Muhammad believe that a man is either a citizen or he's not a citizen. He is not a citizen by the degree. If the black man in America is not recognized as a first-class citizen, we don't feel that he's a citizen at all. People come here from Hungary and are integrated into the American way of life overnight. They are not put in any fourth class or third class or any kind of class. The only one who is put in this category is the so-called Negro who was forced to beg the white man to accept him. We feel that if 100 years after the so-called Emancipation Proclamation, the black man is still not free, then we don't feel what Lincoln did to set them free in the first place. Bayard Rustin. This is all well and good, but you're not answering my question. Malcolm X. I am answering your question. The black man in America, once he gets his so-called freedom, is still 9,000 miles away from which he called his home. Pause right there for a sidebar. Because a lot of cats out here saying, well, Malcolm X was an Aboriginal, he talking about Aboriginal and all that stuff like that. No, he knew he was an African. You know what I'm saying? So that kills it right there. His problem is different from that of others who are striving for freedom. In other countries, they are the majority and the oppressor is the minority. But here, the oppressor is the majority. The white man can't just let you sit down. He finds someone else to run his factories. So we don't think the passive approach can work here. And we don't see any other than the so-called Negro was encouraged to seek freedom this way. The liberals tell the so-called Negro to use the passive approach and turn the other cheek. But they have never told whites who were in bondage to use a passive approach. They don't tell whites in Eastern Europe who are under the Russian yoke to be passive in their resistance. They give them guns and make heroes out of them and call them freedom fighters. But if a black man becomes militant in his striving against oppression, then he's immediately classified as a fanatic. The white man is posing as the leader of the free, so-called free world. And the only way he can be accepted as the leader of the so-called free world is to be accepted by the majority of the people on this earth. The majority of whom are not white people. They measure him by the way he treats non-white people here in America. This integration talk is hypocrisy, meant to impress our brothers in Africa or Asia. Rustin. Then what are you saying? That you are not opposed to integration because it's not meaningful and it cannot work? If you believe that integration is not possible, then the logic of your position should be that you are seeking to find a piece of territory and go for it. Either you're advocating the continuation of slavery, since you feel like we cannot get integration by the methods that I advocate, which is to say, the slow, grinding process of integration, or you're proposing separation. Malcolm X. We believe integration is hypocrisy. If the government has to pass laws to let us in their education system, if they had to pass laws to get the white man to accept us in better housing in their neighborhoods, that is equivalent to holding a gun to their head, and that is hypocrisy. If the white man were to accept us without laws being passed, then we will go for it. Rustin. Do you think that's going to happen? Malcolm X. Well, your common sense tell you, sir, that's not going to happen. Rustin. But if you can do it through the constitutional method and cannot do it through brotherhood, then what do you see as a future for black people here, and why should they stay? Malcolm X. As any intelligent person can see, the white man is not going to share his wealth with his ex-slaves. But God has taught us the only solution for the ex-slave and the enslaved master is to separate. Rustin. Then you believe in separation. Malcolm X. We absolutely do believe in separation. Rustin. Well, are you being logical by saying, let's take over a territory, a part of the U.S., or are you saying, let's go outside? Malcolm X. I think both are logical. Land can be anywhere. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad teaches us that we have some land of our own. It just means that we have some land of our own. Now, if the master's intentions are good, and since we have been faithful workers, I should say, faithful service all these years, then it seems he should give us some of these states. Rustin. All right, it is clear that you're advocating separation. Malcolm X. Separation, not integration. Bayard Rustin. All right now. That is clear that we could put it out of the way and move to other things. There isn't there any consistency in your economic position where they're going to move to. When Moses took his people into the desert, he had a pretty clear idea of where he was going. Malcolm X. Well, mentioning Moses is right. The people that Moses was leading were probably the closest parallel to the problems confronting the so-called Negro. Moses' people were slaves in a land that was not theirs. Moses' people had a slave mentality. They were worshiping God that was not their own. The Negro in America is the same way. He worships the white man God, and he's following the white man religion. And they're in the same fix socially, mentally, politically, spiritually as a people whom Moses grew up amongst 4,000 years ago. Now, if you recall, Moses didn't advocate integration. Moses advocated separation. Nowhere in the Bible will you find that Moses told his people to integrate themselves with Pharaoh. His one doctrine was, let my people go. That meant separate, not seek integration in a house of bondage. It did not mean to seek acceptance from the slave master. He said, if you follow me, I will lead you to a land flowing with milk and honey. He never told anyone there where the land was. He never told the people where he was taking them or what we had to go through. And if you go back to that time, you will see that some of them believed him, but many were afraid of the slave master. They didn't believe that they can get along without Pharaoh. They didn't believe anybody would give them a job if Pharaoh didn't. They didn't believe they can have an economic system free of Pharaoh. Remember, Pharaoh himself never opposed Moses. He always got magicians to oppose Moses. And today, the modern slave masters get a lot of so-called Negro politicians to oppose Elijah Muhammad and to work a lot of magic to make the so-called Negro think he's a crazy man. Just as Pharaoh had magicians to make the Hebrews think Moses was some kind of crazy man. But now let me say this. We feel the Honorable Elijah Muhammad is a modern Moses. Some say Adam Clayton Powell is the modern Moses, and some say Martin Luther King is the modern Moses. But no one can claim to be a modern Moses until he found out first Moses did. We'll find out what the first Moses did. And Moses never advocated integration. He advocated complete separation. He did not advocate passive resistance. He advocated an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Love your enemy. As long as you teach that man that kind of philosophy, he will remain a slave. Rustin. Well, I'm a great advocate of nonviolence, but I think all this talk of whether to integrate or not and getting involved with the economic life of this country might be more interesting to me if I knew where you want to lead the people. But I do not know where you want to go, and I don't think you do either. Malcolm X. Yes, we do. We could take some land right here, sir. Bayard Rustin. Yes, but if you do not believe in integration and they don't love you, do you think they're going to give you 10 or 12 states? Malcolm X. Mr. Rustin, the predicament that is the man is in is what makes him reach certain decisions. America is in the worst position of any country in the history of the world. Bayard Rustin. I agree. Malcolm X. Now, what's causing this predicament? The race problem. Americans' number one problem is the so-called Negro. What must we do? And what must I do about this Negro problem? And whenever America's attacked on a race problem, what can she say? Rustin. She can say a lot. Malcolm X. What? Rustin. I tell you what. I have spent 25 years of my life on a race question. I have been in jail 22 times. Americans can say, until 1954, Negroes could not go to school with whites. Now they can. Negroes cannot join trade unions. Now they can. I do not say any of this is perfect, but it's enough for America to be able to answer Russia and China and the rest on a race question. And more important, it's enough to keep the great majority of Negroes feeling that things can improve here. Until you have someplace to go, they are going to want you to stay here. Now, I want to stop right here and get something clear. In Muhammad's mind, this may be a religious matter, but in the minds of his followers, the Muslim movement is a psychological and a political concept. They do not read the Quran, they read the Bible. They are essentially and culturally Christian, not Muslims. Why, therefore, do they call themselves Muslims? Because they do not want to use the same religious terminology that their master used. Most Negroes who came to America came from the west coast of Africa long before the spread of Islam to that part of Africa. Malcolm X. This is what the white man taught you after stripping your original culture. Now consider the Mali Empire. This shows the influence of Muslim religion in West Africa before the discovery of America. Rustin. I am not putting down the culture of West Africa. I'm just saying that the Islamic influence came later. All over West Africa, you find wonderful sculptures which are sources of much of 20th century European art, notably Picasso and Cubism. Now, these figures cannot have been made if the influence of Islam had prevailed, because you ought to know Muslims are not allowed to create figures in their art objects. Malcolm X. Let me quote from the Times last Sunday. It says that Islam is spreading like wildfire in Nigeria, and Christianity is only skin deep. Host. Does progress involve greater sense of racial identity? Rustin. Now this is Bayard Rustin. I want people to pay attention to what he's about to say. Rustin. I believe it's very important to have a great sense of racial identity because I believe it's quite impossible for people to struggle creatively if they do not truly believe in themselves. I believe that identity first. This, for me, is undoubtedly important because believing in integration and not being told where we can go, I can see nothing more logical than staying here and struggling for one's rights. Also because of the moral principles, but leave them aside for a moment. I can see no way for the Negro to struggle except through nonviolence and dedication to a strategic nonviolence as a matter of principle. Now, therefore, if you're going to struggle with nonviolence to a certain extent, you're going to leave a certain affection for your people whom are mistreating you. Now, affection for other fellow is not possible without a great sense of dignity for oneself, and therefore the dignity of the Negro, for me, is not something that is aside. It is essential for the struggle. The people of Montgomery were able to struggle and get integration on their buses for a simple reason. 10 years before, they couldn't have done it because they did not believe in themselves. When they believe in themselves, they can be socially affectionate to the opposition, while at the same time they can be extremely militant and walking and being prepared to sacrifice. I think this is the most important, and I would therefore agree with Malcolm X that doing away with the ugliness resulting from poverty in their position in society is very necessary and important. We can certainly agree here. But now let me ask you another question because I want to clarify your position on the Jewish question. Sidebar. Why is he going to the Jewish question for Bayard Rustin? I do not know. I don't know what the Jews got to do with this. Where do you and your group come out on this question? Why? Sidebar again. Why is this question even important? I do not know. I am given to the understanding that your position is particularly in Harlem that one of the reasons that Negroes are so oppressed is that Jews are exploiting them and that Jews are attempting to exploit the Arab world and stir up difficulties in the Middle East. I'd like to know if this is a misunderstanding that I have. Malcolm X, if you have read what the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has written, and he has written much, I don't think you can find an article where he has ever pointed out the Jews as an exploiter of the black man. He speaks of the exploiter. Period. He doesn't break it down in terms of Frenchman or Englishman or Jew or German. He speaks of the exploiter. And sometimes the man who is most guilty of this exploitation will think you are pointing the finger at him and put out propaganda that you are anti-this and anti-that. We make no distinction between the exploitation, and the exploiter. Bayard Rustin. Now, what do you mean that the man who was most exploited will put out propaganda? Malcolm X. I say this, that when a man puts out propaganda against Muslims, usually that man feels that the finger is being pointed at him. But, Bayard Rustin, in other words, you feel that many Jews feel this way. Malcolm X. I don't know. But I say that you cannot find anything that the Honorable Elijah Muhammad has written or said that at any time will label Jews as an exploiter. No, sir. He speaks about exploitation and oppression and the deception that has been used against black people in America. Now that man that is guilty, let whoever is guilt wear their shoe. But he has never made a distinction between a Frenchman or a Jew or a German. The exploiter is an exploiter. I don't care what kind of label you put on him, you can't duck it. Now, and there you have it. Now, this is not the full interview, or this is not the full thing. It gets bits and pieces on it on YouTube. But many people don't know that Bayard Rustin, he was a CIA agent. You know, he worked for the CIA. And he wasn't, as you can see, he really wasn't that much of a black nationalist on the tip. He's more of an integrationist. And he told black people to, march peacefully, and that was militant to go through that. But also, many people don't know that Bayard Rustin was also a Jewish Zionist. You know what I'm saying? When Israel was attacked, he was all for giving Israel weapons and things of that nature for the Jews to protect themselves from the Arabs' invasions during this time when Israel was still developing as a country. You understand what I'm trying to say? So his heart always lied with the Jews and their Zionist nationalism for them. And he told them to kill and protect and do all type of stuff like that. Kill the enemy, things of that nature. But when it came down to his own peoples, you know what I'm saying, the black people, the so-called Negro in America, he told them to march. You know what I'm saying? He told them to peacefully suffer and love the enemy and things of that nature. But he didn't tell his fellow Zionist buddies to do the same thing. Now, as you see, like I said before, you can look it up. Bayard Rustin did work for the CIA. He was involved in a couple coups and doing things for the master, whatnot. You know what I'm saying? Also, too, a lot of people he was LGBT. He never really brought his homosexuality to light like that. You know what I'm saying? He never really was down for not really. He even admitted to it himself, and you can look it up that he was not really down with the homosexual community like that, even though he lived that way. You understand? Later on in life, he became a neoconservative, and he was down with Ronald Reagan and all type of stuff like that. Anywho, this is Sikosi of Funday. Before I get into that too, Malcolm X, as we know, I think they had a couple debates too. This is one of the first, early ones. But Malcolm was smoked. You know, if you read the book, there's a book called Malcolm X Speaks. When he got to another debate with Bayard Rustin, he smoked the. He got into him, cut it to him real bad. You know what I'm saying? Malcolm was very, he had like about an 8th grade education. This dude was highly intelligent. Highly intelligent and well read. You know what I'm saying? And that's from the upright upbringing of the discipline that he got from his father in the UNIA when he was in Michigan. You know what I'm saying? And the continuation of that when he joined the Nation of Islam. Hey, this is, the Koski of Fun Day. As I said before, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel because we drop African history like this all day, every day. Peace.